Hello everyone, Jonathan here from Triple Games, and in this video I'm going to be showcasing the new features of my TMG Camera Tools add-on for Blender. This is going to be a long video, so I left different chapters in the description. Let's get started. First off, you'll notice that the panel has been separated into different categories. This allows you to show and hide different features based on what you're working on at a given time. In the camera category, we have the active scene camera. If you click this, it drops down a list of all cameras in the scene. Then we can click between the different cameras, and they each have different settings. Below that, we have 4 action buttons. This one selects the active scene camera, and this one toggles between camera view. This one will center and scale the camera view to the outside, scene area. So if I were to move this over here, it will frame the camera view. The 4th button allows you to lock the camera view. So if I rotate around the scene, you'll notice that the camera rotates with it. And if I uncheck that, then you'll just jump out of camera view. You can even zoom in and pan around to give you different results. And beside that, we have the render engine, EV, workbench, and cycles. And below this, we have a name subpanel. This allows you to rename the camera. You'll notice that we have linked name or not linked. This allows you to change the object name and the data name separately. So if I were to change this to _D, the data would change. So we have C barrels and C barrels D. If I were to link them together, and both of them would equal the same. So I have to change that real quick for it to change, and there we go. Then if we go into the perspective subpanel, we have options for perspective. We have the sensor profile, sensor fit, focal length, sensor width, clip start, and clip end. The perspective can be orthographic, panoramic, and perspective. I have different sensor profiles. These are all custom, so you can set them to 24, set them 36, 50, 80, 210. We'll just go back to 80. It doesn't change the sensor width, but it does change the focal length. So you can always adjust this as well. To give you some interesting results. And from there, we have the clip start. So you can increase that, and you can start clipping out what objects you want to see and what you don't want to see. Drop that down to 20. So if I just wanted to see this barrel, I could adjust my clip start and clip end. There you go. Now if we go into the constraints category, we have floor, follow path, and track 2. If I click on floor, there are 4 action buttons. One will add a constraint, and you can move the constraint up or down, and you can remove the constraint. You can even toggle if the constraint is active or not. I'm just going to remove it from this camera. I'm going to zoom out here, and then I'm going to Shift A. I'm going to add a curve. I'm going to move this up a little bit. Then I'm going to Shift A, add in a camera, and with this camera, I'm going to make it the active selection. And you don't have to have it actively selected, you can select some other object, and we can add a constraint, floor, add a floor constraint. You can use the eyedrop tool, or you can drop down and type what object you want to select. I'm just going to use the eyedrop The floor constraint allows you to adjust the camera's height based on different objects. Going to add a follow path. We are going to select our path, which is based on different curves. And you'll notice that our camera is way off the path, so I'm going to select it. I'm going to press Alt-G to clear the transforms, Alt-S and Alt-R, and I'm going to scale our curve, but I'm not going to do it manually, I'm going to do it through our add-on. And notice you can scale on the X, Y, Z individually, so you can get some interesting results like that. But I'm going to lock the scale, since we have a circle. And I'm going to add a track 2 as well. And I'm going to Shift A. I'm going to add in a cube. I don't need to select the camera because our add-on doesn't need the context of the active object. Now the camera is looking at the object. So if I were to move our cube over here, our camera is now tracking to the object. I'm just going to jump into the camera view. We are very, very close, so I'm going to change the perspective to something like 36. Then we can adjust the camera. One thing I find fun is if you click on the offset, type in #frame, and then divide it by 2. This will make one rotation every 200 frames. And to showcase that, just going to add in a timeline. Oh, there you go. We have a driver that's driving our camera. And again, you can toggle the visibility of different things. And you can even adjust the camera floor. And you can scale out the curve. If we go into the output category, we have image and image settings. We have the image output. You can click on the image or animation and it will create a still frame or an animation. We have render slot. If we go into the image settings, you can use nodes or not use nodes in the compositor. We have file extensions, cache results, you have the file format, so you can have an FFmpeg video for MP4, or you can use image sequences. You can even use RGB alpha, red, green, blue, and black and white. You can overwrite the image sequence, or you can keep what was rendered before, and you can even have placeholders. So if I render this image out, now if we open up the image editor, we can see that the cube was rendered out. So I mentioned we had different slots. You can change them there, or we go over to View, and I'm going to click Area. I'm going to duplicate area into Window. And then I'm going to go over to the 3D viewport, and we can change the render slot from here. I'm going to close the timeline, we don't need that anymore, and close the output category. Then in the passes category, we have Cryptomat, we have Data, we have Effects, Light, and Shader AOV. I'm not quite sure what that does, to be honest. But if you're into compositing, then you can change over to cycles, and you'll notice that some settings change per workspace. Workbench doesn't seem to have any passes. but cycles has denoising data as well as a few other things. So that can be useful if you have bloom or shadows and stuff you want to composite over. If we go into the render category, we have aspect, which allows you to change from landscape, portrait, and box. What this is doing is changing the resolution. We have 1920 by 1920 because we're in boxed. We have 1080 by 1920 portrait and 1920 1080 landscape. You can change the resolution here as well. So VGA 640 by 480. High definition is 1280 by 720. Full high definition is 1920 by 1080. 2K is 2560 by 1440. 4K is 3840 by 2160. And 8K is 7680 by 4320. I'll just change that down to high definition, full. Under sampling, we have the render samples and viewport samples, as well as viewport denoising. Timeline allows you to play and rewind, jump around the different frames. You can even set the start and end frame. Into the scene effects category, we have ambient occlusion. Let me just go back into render view, zoom in, and we can turn ambient occlusion on and off. We have bloom. You can have depth of field, so we can select our cube here, and we can set the f-stop to something lower. And you can also change the bokeh, high definition, high quality slicing, jitter. Which can give you some really interesting results. If you change the perspective, you'll end up with different depth of field. And the same can be said if you set that to vertical or horizontal. Just turn that off for now. You even have motion blur. All those settings are mostly default. You have screen space reflection as well. You can change the shadows. There's stereoscopy. We have subsurface scattering and volumetrics. In the viewport category, we have composition, display, user preferences, and view. To use composition, you have to allow the use of viewport overlays. It's because we have thirds. Let's see here. In order for me to do this a little bit easier, I'm going to go over to track 2. I'm going to turn that off. And we'll just look out. Yeah, somewhere over there, I guess. It's kind of difficult to see, but we have the thirds composition here. We have center, diagonal, ratio, triangle A, triangle B, and you can toggle all of them on if you want some really interesting results. Thirds and center are probably the ones I'm more interested in. You can go over to display, and you can show the limits of the camera, mist, sensor. That could be pretty useful. So you can see that it's vertical or horizontal. You can show the name of the camera. You have to toggle that on and off per camera. I may change that later. Now the passport out, I changed it so that was always going to be a constant. So if I set that to 1, and then you change over to a different camera, it's going to be a 1 here as well. If you untoggle it here, it will be untoggled over there. I kind of like 0.9, it helps you see what you're doing without too much distraction in the background. And user preferences, I exposed region overlap, just because I like having the camera show something like this versus showcasing to where the panel is overlapping the image. Just makes things a little bit easier for me to see. Also, you can render in a new window, the image editor, maximized area, and keep user interface. In the view category, we can change out of the active camera view. I'll just zoom in on our cube. We can change the viewport focal length. We can change the clip start. Change the clip end. Just makes things a little bit easier to work with. And the render region. This is the end of the video. If you liked what I did here, please support me on Gumroad. It's $5 minimum, or you can pay more if you're feeling generous. If not, that's okay too. I'll leave a link to the GitHub repo in the description as well. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy using the TMG Camera Tools add-on for Blender. Have a good day.